Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Marketing Detective. We took a couple of weeks off, and boy, are we glad we did, because today we have an amazing guest who is going to be sharing a little bit about his life, his journey, and his brand new book. And that's our focus today on the Marketing Detective. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Marketing Detective. As you may remember, we are now an award-winning a Marketing Detective with the winning of our Telly Award. If you haven't seen it, please go to our fan page and check that out. You helped us get there, so thank you for joining us for another conversation. And today is a little different. We are going to be talking about marketing and advertising in a very different way, but my guest today is a man who is both a lawyer. He has dabbled a little bit as an actor. He has struggled with addiction throughout his life and has been very vocal about that conversation. But even more so, he's also a published author with his second book that we're going to be talking about today. My guest is Mark Cuban. Mark, thanks for joining us today here on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. And so let's just kind of dive in and let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Now, you grew up in the Pittsburgh area?
I did. I grew up in a suburb called Mount Lebanon and born and raised. And then I went on to Penn State University, which a lot of people do when you're from Pittsburgh, and then to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law in Labor Day 1986 with $50 to my name and a duffel bag of smelly old clothes. Took a Greyhound bus to Dallas, Texas, met my older brother, Mark, at the bus station and started my life here.
Nice. So when you started out your career, you were a lawyer.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience as a lawyer.
I never wanted to be a lawyer, and there's an interesting story of how I got there. But I was, through my entire time as a lawyer, I was struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. I was an alcoholic, and I was addicted to cocaine severely. And it really, I had a few good years, but it really, in the end, destroyed my law practice. I was a personal injury lawyer, and I was going to court high. I was doing cocaine in the courthouse bathroom. It was just a mess. And finally, I had no clients left. I've been to jail. I've been to a psychiatric hospital twice, 3 failed marriages. One more, I get a free set of steak knives. And so I finally, when I began my recovery in Easter weekend 2007, and I cleared my head and really focused on what I was passionate about, I decided it wasn't the law, and I no longer practice.
So is that when you started writing?
Yes, I started writing really as a self-healing journey. I started out journaling, and then I went to blogging. And then I'm also in recovery from bulimia, believe it or not. Guys do get eating disorders, right? About 1 in 3, if not more, are guys. And that may surprise some of your viewers. But I started writing about my eating disorder recovery, and I actually wrote my first book, so I have 3 books, called Shattered Image, which was really just about eating disorders and body image. And because of my last name and because I'm a guy with an eating disorder, that book got a lot of publicity. And so then I started speaking at colleges and such, and that's really how I got into writing. But Shattered Image was really just written kind of as a self-healing journey for me.
And you have spent most of your later career as a keynote speaker.
Yes.
Talking about your journey of addiction. Do you know where that started?
Addiction, there were social factors, not really genetics for me, but there were a lot of social and kind of personality factors that created a perfect storm. And to really understand it, let's take the hot tub time machine back to Pittsburgh, PA.
Nice reference. Yeah.
In the baby boomer era, back when cell phones were 2 cups attached to a string, right? And social networking was playing dodgeball on the basketball court.
Yeah.
I'm the middle of 3 boys. People know my older brother, Mark. I have a younger brother, Jeff. And Mark, as you might expect, Mitchell, was outgoing, the firstborn, outgoing, selling this door to door, selling that door to door. I remember
He's a salesman.
He's been a salesman since he was 15 years old. And for those who don't know, Mark Cuban, the Mavs, and Shark Tank. And I remember our local newspaper, there was a printer strike in the 70s. They both shut down. Back in the days when you only had 2 newspapers and 3 television stations. And he and his buddies, barely old enough to drive, they drove from Pittsburgh to Cleveland, about 200 miles, and they bought the Cleveland Plain dealer, drove them back to Pittsburgh, and sold them on a street corner in downtown Pittsburgh for twice what they paid for them. 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
So you kind of knew what he was going to be.
He was born to be an
He was
entrepreneur.
born to be a salesman.
Yeah.
My younger brother, Jeff, kind of a wild child. He was a jock, very good looking, a nationally ranked wrestler. The beer parties, the prom, the dates, the girls, all the things that I associated with acceptance and love. And Mitchell, I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy, I was withdrawn, and I internalized anything negative said about me and wore it as who I was, like a skin-tight suit. And unfortunately, I had a difficult relationship with my mother. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, but I want to make it clear that I do not blame my mother for the things I went through. There is no parent blaming here. Parents do not cause addiction. Parents do not cause eating disorders. There is a difference between cause and correlation. But things that go on in the home can cause issues later in life for some people and not others, right? That's why it's correlation. There was a lot of fat shaming in my household. My mother would come home from selling real estate, and I would be eating Chef Boyardee ravioli out of the can. I used to love that. Did you ever eat that?
I did.
Beefaroni and SpaghettiOs.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't, back in the days of the old style can opener, you go, stick the spoon in. We didn't have a microwave. And my mom would say, Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things my mother's mother said to her, and these were the things my great-grandmother probably said to my grandmother. Fat shaming in families is
from one generation to another.
Handed down generationally. Yeah. My mother had a very verbally and mentally abusive relationship with her, as she phrased it, bipolar mother. Very mental. And my mother was dealing with her own mental health issues, so I don't blame her for any of that. But, and when I came home from bad grades, she would call me a dumb bunny, which was a lot. I never had good grades. I was a very mediocre student in high school. And as her mother said to her, I mean, it was awful, the relationship they had.
Yeah.
But hearing these things and not really understanding Psychology 101, I grew depressed and I began to eat more Chef Boyardee ravioli and more, and I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. And what happens when kids start to change in school for what other kids perceive in the negative? I started to be bullied.
Yeah.
The fat pig, you need to go to Sears and Roebuck back when they were a thing and get a bra. And I developed a very self-deprecating sense of humor, right?
Yeah, because you would rather insult yourself before somebody got there to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's actually something I have to watch myself with today. It was my defense mechanism to be the sad clown or be the clown, right? Yeah, I'm headed to Sears right now, I know, yeah. I'm going to let out another notch on my belt, ha ha. Because in my mind, these kids who were doing this to me were the kids who were getting their first date, their first kiss, going to the high school, going to the prom or to the parties after the football game, all the things I wanted so badly, but was too shy and withdrawn and self-conscious to ask.
Now, let me ask you, so you're going through this struggle, your mom's going through her struggle, which I really respect the fact that you honor your mother in a way to say, she wasn't perfect, but she had her issues and that led to her, that she wasn't the monster.
No.
It was an environment and it was a time that we were living in, not to give anybody a pass or an excuse. But what was it like did Mark, being this really ambitious, really driven, very creative, outgoing, was that difficult for you as the middle child, as a little brother, being sandwiched between a younger brother who kind of has found his way and an older brother that found his?
That's a great question. And you have to remember that we were stair-stepped. We're about 2.5 to 3 years apart, all of us. So Jeff and Mark having the biggest age difference. We all had our own group, right? No, I had very few friends. I spent a lot of time at home in my bedroom playing different games and stuff because I really didn't have a lot of friends. But we ran in different circles. So I wouldn't say that there was a lot of self-awareness on Mark being this, this person. I looked up to my brother, period, because of he was outgoing and charismatic. But I wouldn't say that I felt lesser because of it. I looked out. He was, my father and my brothers are my heroes, and they were then, and they still are today. And so I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
There was probably more jealousy of my younger brother with all the girls and stuff.
Okay. All right. So talk a little bit about your dad. You mentioned that he was a hero. What was it that really could have stood out
Well,
about your dad?
Can I back up for one
Yeah.
second? There was one, you asked about my life in childhood, and when we talk about my addiction struggles, I do have to mention that it all kind of culminated in a day when my brother Mark had given me a pair of disco pants, shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants, believe it or not.
Okay.
This was Saturday Night Fever was just about to come out, and this was the disco era, and Mark was all into the disco clubs and says he even taught disco, though I haven't verified that. But he gave me this pair of pants that didn't fit him too well. Didn't fit me too well, and I had to spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats back there, but I wore them because I love my brother. And I was walking home from school one day with these kids in Pittsburgh, Mount Lebanon, and this was my freshman year in high school. And they're making fun of my pants, but in my mind, these are the kids that I want to be around, right? But they're also some bullies.
Yeah.
And because one day it'll be like a fraternity hazing, and they'll say, "You're one of us now." But that's not how bullying works, is it? And they physically assaulted me. And they ripped the pants off me. It started out pulling at them, and then it red, and then it shred, and then they're like rabid dogs. And down in my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities, my Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt, my Keds, and my tube socks, and went on like they'd done the funniest thing ever. And I gathered up the shreds, and I waddled home.
That breaks my heart.
And I got home, and there was no one home, and it was funeral silence. And I walked down, we have these wooden steps, and my mom still lives in the house, down in the basement. And I'm walking down these wooden steps, and with every creak, Mitch, I felt like the whole world knew my shame, right? Like the entire world could hear each creak. And I hid the shreds at the bottom of the wastebasket, hoping it would hide my shame. And I never told anyone for decades. I didn't tell anyone for decades. And that was an incredibly traumatic event, and so traumatic that I could go to that spot in Pittsburgh and show you exactly where it happened. So you have to understand my addiction struggles. You have to understand the whole package. So I wanted to make sure we got into that before we talk about my father.
And before we do that, I just want to, from your story, something that kind of elevated to me, and that was, you mentioned that, they're going to bully me today, but one day they're going to consider me a frat brother, that we seek that validation from them.
Yes.
And by the way, your struggle is a struggle that so many kids go through.
Sure.
And imagine, Brian, us living in the social media world, where
I
these
know.
kids, at least when you went home and you went down to that basement,
It was over.
It was over. Now you went back to it the next day when you went to school, but you didn't have to deal with that.
Exactly.
The same way these kids are being taunted and haunted every single day, all hours of the day. And so, anyway, I thank you for sharing such a vulnerable story about your childhood. And it breaks my heart because I can visualize that moment happening.
Yeah, and obviously it's something I've never forgotten. I take lessons from it, and it's funny. I've talked about it, and people say, "Don't you want to?" I used to be. We separated for political reasons, so I'm not friends with them anymore. But I used to be Facebook friends with some of those kids, and that did that. And people say, "Don't you want to tell them what they did?" No, this isn't Maury Povich. I'm not the father, right? This isn't a reality show. These are men my age with children and grandchildren. Of course not. I want them to have happy lives, happy children, hopefully not repeating cycles.
Yeah. Well, that is so strong of you, and really something to be admired, that you have risen above that and saying, I'm not going to be vindictive. I'm not going to be hateful. I'm going to just move on and forgive them and move on. But I'm going to tell my story and to warn others about that, your journey.
And you're right about it. So different today. In my day, baby boomer, going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew about it, right?
Yeah.
So it was a very different era.
Yeah. So let's go back to your dad, and that relationship you had with your dad.
Very close. He passed a few years ago, and very close. My dad was my hero. My dad was a veteran of the Greatest Generation, a veteran of the Pacific. He was a CB on Okinawa during the Battle of Okinawa.
Wow.
He fought in Korea. And then he and his brother Marty, my father was the middle of three boys like me.
Now, was he career military?
No.
No.
He
Okay.
couldn't wait to get out of the military.
Okay.
He couldn't wait. He was drafted.
Yeah.
And
I was drafted too, although my father never knew the draft had ended in the 70s.
well, it was funny. My father was drafted into World War II, and then he went into the reserve because they paid you money, not realizing he was going to be called back to Korea.
Yeah.
And to hear my father tell it, they had to take him down in handcuffs to the depot because he was back in his life, and he wasn't
Exactly.
going back. And but he did. And he and his older brother Marty, they had a what's called a trim shop. It is where you reupholster seats, you put on convertible tops. In Pittsburgh, in the same spot from the end of the Korean War till his brother Marty passed away in 1999. So my father and his two brothers were very close, very close. And this was something he tried to instill in us as family, the gift of family. And I feel so grateful to have that privilege, right, of a strong family core, because it became instrumental in my recovery. When I was standing, Easter weekend 2007, when I was standing in the parking lot of a psychiatric hospital for the second time after a 2-day drug and alcohol-induced blackout, something my father said to me, I remembered something my father said to me that stirred me deeply and was very instrumental in moving me forward into recovery. He used to say to us growing up, guys, no matter where you go in life, no matter what happens, call your brother. Tell your brother you love him. Make sure your brother's okay. And he was passing down this gift of family that he had with his brothers. And I thought about that in that parking lot after years of addiction and near suicide in 2005. And I didn't want to lose my family. I wouldn't lose their love, but my family was getting frustrated. And I wasn't seeing my brothers. I wasn't seeing my father, wasn't seeing my nieces and nephews. I was only hanging around with the people who loved me until the cocaine was gone, right? And if you want to know how that gift stuck, all these decades later, 1,200 miles from Pittsburgh, my two brothers and I live walking distance to each other. And my father, until he passed, lived across the street from me. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean across the street. And I feel very privileged. And that is why, yes, my father and my brothers are my heroes. My brother saved my life in 2005 when I was going to end it by suicide.
You know, not to get political, but the last 5 years have been difficult for a lot of families.
Yes.
A lot of families torn apart.
Yes.
The pandemic itself tore a lot of families apart over get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated.
Or parents in nursing homes.
Yes.
We went through that with my wife's father, unable to see her father.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, we're privileged enough. I have 5 siblings. I'm number 5 of 6. But unfortunately, I don't have the greatest relationship. And I'm now saying this publicly for the first time ever in a podcast. Don't have a great relationship with all of them. A few of them, I have a very close relationship. And it is unfortunately just the reality of life. I hope that's not going to be that way forever. They don't necessarily approve of who I am as a human being.
Understand.
And that's difficult because while we want the validation of our friends, we need the validation of our family.
Yes.
More so. And I know you've lived that.
Yes.
What advice, not to put you on the spot, what advice could you give family members that are dealing with that with their siblings? What would you say to them?
That you can't bring someone down the yellow brick road who doesn't want to go, who doesn't want to take the path. And what you can do is take care of you, live the life that you love, and show people that you are living the life that you love and that you are happy and live your best life, because anything else, in my opinion, and just speaking to my experience, people have been through awful things, right? And have different, there are different reasons for people being estranged, right?
Yeah.
My reasons aren't the same as yours.
Yeah.
And so, but live your best life and work towards just being self-acceptance and loving yourself and the love of the people who do accept you for who you are. And that's all you can do, because you can't drag people with you who don't want to go.
I didn't think we were going to have an Oprah moment here. This has been very insightful and very encouraging, and I hope that our viewers also see that. I did want to transition because we have a great book we want to talk about. If we could show a shot of the book, we've got it with us. It's The Ambulance Chaser. It just dropped on Tuesday.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the book and a little of the genesis of where this came from.
The Ambulance Chaser is my debut novel. It's a legal thriller, or you might call it a murder thriller, although it can be both. It is about a Pittsburgh personal injury lawyer. I'm from Pittsburgh, so you write what you know.
Yeah.
It is about a Pittsburgh personal injury lawyer named Jason Feldman, who finds himself accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered in a vacant lot. He is arrested, charged with a murder, and he flees, becoming a fugitive from justice to find the one person who can both prove his innocence and save the life of his kidnapped son. And I think I worked 3 years on it, and it's a work of love. And the reviews have been great. It sold thousands of books in pre-order, which was thrilling, and we can talk about that.
And we're going to talk about the marketing piece of it.
Yeah.
And of course, I follow you on social media, and you were so gracious to agree to come share some time with us today. One of the posts that I saw, and I've been screenshotting some of these. I have to give credit. This was one of the best reviews I've ever heard about a book. The woman said she started reading it at like at 2:00, and she stayed up until midnight reading. She could not put it down. She compared you to John Grisham, which is a tremendous. I mean, it wasn't your words; it was hers. She said you had better plot development and storyline, and she ended by saying she can't wait to go to Pittsburgh to go find out to walk all the places where the book took place. That's got to make you feel good.
It does. Obviously, I would never compare myself to John Grisham. John has written wonderful books and paid his dues.
Yes, he
does
has.
very well. So
Yeah.
and you know what? I just want to be the first Brian Cuban, right?
There you go.
So it's and my thought to that art, does Grisham write sex scenes? It's been a while since I've read one of his books. And,
Yes, she did mention that your sex scenes were better than the sex scenes
Yeah.
in the John Grisham. And I began to think, I'm not sure if I remember reading anything in the Runaway Jury.
And you know
Yeah.
what that tells you? They are not a focus of John Grisham books, right? And they're not a focus of The Ambulance Chaser either. They are for people who don't like graphic scenes, they are not graphic. They are very mild and more innuendo than anything else. But it's always great to hear those and pump your ego. But as the book spiders out, I'm sure the reviews will be mixed, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't please everyone. You don't write for everyone.
And you even had some pushback with the title, Ambulance Chaser.
I had some pushback from the
Tell
title.
us a little bit about that.
From personal injury lawyers.
Yeah.
I had some pushback on the title from personal injury lawyers who were insulted because Ambulance Chaser can be considered a slur in the personal injury field. And it's a title I say with the greatest of deference to the wonderful personal injury lawyers I know. A guy named Phil DeLucente in Pittsburgh is called Get Phil, was one of the top personal injury lawyers in Pittsburgh, and he helped me with the book. And there are wonderful personal injury lawyers, but there's a reason for the trope, right? There's a reason for the stereotype. So,
Yeah. And one of the tropes of your book is, and I want to talk about the dream that kind of inspired this. But one of the tropes that kind of led the book is the skeletons of your childhood coming back. So tell us a little about that. Tell us about the dream that kind of inspired.
Sure.
The
Well,
book.
The Ambulance Chaser is the plot is about old skeletons coming back to the present, and that's nothing new, another trope, right?
Yeah.
It's but there are only 8 or 9 plots in the world, right? So, the genesis was a very dark dream that I had years ago. It was reoccurring, and it was about a childhood friend of mine and I, as children in Pittsburgh, throwing bodies into a bonfire and watching these bodies burn. And the eyes, these 8-ball eyes, these cracked 8-ball eyes are staring at us while they're burning. And then the dream fast forwards to me as an adult, terrified wondering if I'm going to be arrested and why haven't I been arrested for these murders? I threw these bodies into a bonfire. No, I have never committed a murder, okay?
We'll make that very clear to our audience
Yes.
that you are not a murderer, but you felt like one because of the dream that you had. But then it stuck with you
And
physically, right?
and
For a
it's
couple of hours.
And it physically stuck with me, and it happened in such a way. I'm a very vivid dreamer. I remember all my dreams. And it happened to me in such a way that I would actually second guess my memory. Did I kill someone? Have I murdered someone? It was so weird. And as you might imagine, you try to figure out what it means. My therapist and I have spent many hours trying to figure out
Unwrapping that one.
what that means. That's okay.
Wow.
And I'm out for a jog, and I'm thinking about it, the dream, and it just suddenly clicked. Old bodies, old skeletons coming back, couple characters, a person and his high school best friend. Don't give away too much about the ambulance chaser. There's a potential novel here.
Yeah.
And that is the genesis. That is the core genesis of the ambulance chaser. Now, it has gone through many ideations since then.
Yeah.
Right? But that core has remained the same.
Wow. So, and this is not a standalone book.
No, this is not. It is going to be a trilogy. I am already working on the sequel that I'm working on some different plot devices for. And so I'm very excited about that as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, who knows? Maybe this will get turned into a Netflix series. Who knows? You never know.
From your mouth to Netflix ears.
That's right.
To a
Now,
screenwriter's ears.
if anyone at Netflix is listening, hey, there's an idea here that we could develop. Yeah, content is king, and as you know, in that streaming world, those who have the best content are going to be the ones who are going to be successful. So I think this is some good material to start with.
Yeah, it has a little bit of people. Someone called it it has a little bit of the fugitive vibe to it. But like I said, there are no new plots, right? Anything you read or watch is going to be one of 8 or 9 different plot devices.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
That's right, and it's all boiled down to that, to those different devices.
There are new characters, there are interesting characters, and there are interesting ways to use those plot devices.
So let's talk a little bit about the pre-sale, because you did an amazing job of, and by the book is distributed by Simon & Schuster,
but you can find it wherever.
Yes,
on Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Yes, you can find it anywhere. And so, but you did an amazing job of doing the pre-sale. Tell us a little bit about, without giving away your strategy, just some of the things that you were able to do to kind of generate the buzz that you needed.
Well, what I did was I took lessons I learned first from my previous book, The Addicted Lawyer, which is my memoir. Watching what worked, watching what didn't work when other people released their books and my books. And I realized that everyone was kind of doing the same cookie cutter things, right, when they do their book launch.
Yeah.
Especially, and I focused on debut authors because I knew I was going to be a debut author without a reputation for fiction, which is difficult when you release a book.
Yeah.
So, people create their Facebook page, people do their Instagram page and all these pages, and they're buy my book, they're posting, but because of algorithms, so few people see that book, right? And you sell some books to some of your Facebook friends and your family, and that's great, but it doesn't really give it a shot of going viral to a tribe that you create. And I call it, you're leaving it praying to the book gods that someone says, that some star or someone, right, decides we're going to put you on Oprah or something, and then it's boom.
Yeah.
So, but the book gods only occur, one in like getting struck by lightning.
Yes.
So, what am I going to do to take charge and not leave it to the book gods? I devised a strategy that I'm sure isn't something unique, but for debut authors, I haven't seen it. Others are probably doing. I call it door-to-door digital marketing.
I love that. You mentioned that before we started the podcast. Love that door-to-door digital.
I use that strategy. Don't give too much away because I'm going to talk about it in 22. But I used that strategy to generate well over 2,000 pre-orders for my debut fiction thriller. And for a first-time debut fiction author, that is, I'm told, considered very well. Yeah. Very well. So...
And you mentioned the other thing, gather your tribe. I love that. I love that idea of building your own, I hate to use the word fan base, but the people that like what it is that you're putting out there.
You have to. And here's the mistake people make, because people come to me, Mitch, and their book's launching in a month, and they say, I need to get people, I don't have an email list, which most people don't unless you're, Gary Vee or something, right? You have your giant email list, and anything you do is going to sell.
Yeah.
Your million email list. They say, I'm a month out. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, you're kind of way behind the 8 ball, because it's hard to create your loyalty tribe and your
Yeah.
personal brand loyalty in a month.
Yeah.
I started a year before the Ambulance Chaser came out. And I started a year before the Addicted Lawyer came out, just building my tribe of people who are interested, not just the book, because you don't really, the book's not out yet. Get them interested in me. You create a story around the writing of the book. You create a story around yourself, and people get interested in you and your journey to publication. And that is more how you create your tribe. And you have to start early.
Yeah.
You have to start early. And I have secrets to that.
And I know that once we kind of get back to the speaking circuit, which you and I both have had some experience there, I have a feeling that's going to be a big part of your 2022.
It is, because every debut author, I mean, there are going to be different pre-sales, but every debut author has the ability to substantially increase their pre-sales, just depending on how much effort they want to put in, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It is a lot of work. And I did it myself, right? I didn't have people think, Cuban, you have a team. No, the door-to-door digital sales was all Brian.
Yeah.
All Brian. And it takes a long time. It is literally a 9-to-5 job.
And you've been a man of your word. You've actually already made some donations to some nonprofit,
Yes.
to a nonprofit as a result of a commitment that you made.
Yes.
Do you want to share a little bit about
Sure.
that?
My father, and this is also part of the Ambulance Chaser, right? What you know again, my father struggled mightily with dementia in the years prior to his passing. And anyone whose family has struggled with it knows it is literally the long goodbye, and whether it's Alzheimer's or some
And
other
it's
form.
So much tougher on the family.
And it is just because you're helpless. You're
Yeah.
absolutely helpless to see the essence, and I'll start to tear because it's still fresh in my even 3
Yeah.
years later. But the essence of the person you love just gone. And
them not remembering you, not remembering your memories.
but I will tell you,
Yeah.
and try not to tear up when I do this. My father, this was really in the last couple of weeks of my father's demise. And at this point, I mean, you never knew what he wasn't really even speaking anymore. He was literally just gone. And so I had to go to New York. And it was really stressful to even travel, because you just, you knew that it was coming, and you didn't know what day was going to be the day. So, I mean, I said he lived across the street. I was over there every morning. And so I go over there and I'm sitting, and I have to catch a plane. I'm sitting with him and just holding his wrist. And I start to get up, and, I put my head on his chest and tell him I love him, and whisper in his ear, as we do with people with dementia, because sometimes they can still hear, even though they don't speak or their eyes are closed. And I start to get up. He opened his eyes and said, "Where are you going?" And he hadn't spoken to me in a long time. And I sat back down, and I just started, and he closed his eyes again. I sat back down, started talking to him and whispering in his ear and saying, "I'm not going anywhere." And then I started to get up again, because I had to catch my plane, and it was brutal. And he said, "Brian, I love you." And those were the last words he ever spoke to me.
Wow.
And so dementia is a part of the Ambulance Chaser as well.
But what a great gift
It was.
to have that moment that he remembered you.
Yes.
And was able to say, okay, all right, you're going to get me going. So thank you. That is, and what a fitting way to call to a close to our time together.
But because of that, I donated a portion of the pre-order proceeds to the National Alzheimer's Association, and I wrote them, we had a little event where I wrote them a check.
Yes, and I did see that as well. So as we kind of recap today, as we come to an end to our time, a couple of things I'd like to do in closing is my final thoughts of what I've kind of gleaned from today. And right off the bat, because we are the marketing detective, you talked about door-to-door digital. That is now going to become a part of my vernacular. I love that. Gathering your tribe, building that story to build that audience is so important. You talked about family being instrumental in recovery, which is so important. That you told the story of the disco pants, and now every time I think of disco pants, I'm going to think of Brian Cuban, of that story, and just your journey of through addiction, and you've been, like I said, very vocal about that, and trying to share your story almost as a warning to others.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, Mitch, because what's the definition of addiction? It is obsessive compulsive drug-seeking behavior in the face of known and probable consequences, right? When we say warning, it has kind of just say no connotations, and that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work.
You mean that campaign in the 1980s didn't work? Just say no?
Yeah, it doesn't
Nancy
work.
Reagan?
We know
Okay.
it doesn't work. I mean, Mitch, we lost 100,000 people to overdoses last year, fatal overdoses. The majority of them related to fentanyl, contaminated drugs. And what I want to do and what I try to do in sharing is give people hope. Give people hope and try to, there's a Jewish saying, I'm Jewish, and there's a Jewish saying, it's Kabbalistic, it's called Tikkun Olam, changing the world with acts of kindness. And my act of kindness, I try to change my little part of, is giving people hope that you can recover. Because what's the only requirement, and for people who are wondering, I'm approaching 15 years in long-term recovery. Because what is the only requirement for recovery, Mitch? I ask people this whenever I speak, and they'll say, you got to want it. They have to want it. No, be alive. Be alive. Just the only requirement to recover from addiction is to be above ground. Stay alive. Have hope. Talk to people who have been through it. Listen to stories. And because that's all I want is to give people hope.
Well, I think you have given some people hope. You've given me a little hope today and encouragement, and I appreciate you joining us. If you have not picked up your copy of The Ambulance Chaser, you need to do that. It's available on Amazon, as you mentioned. Just look up the title, Ambulance Chaser by Brian Cuban, a brand new legal thriller. Great read. You'll want to pick a copy of that up. Brian, thank you for joining us today on Our Time. It has been a pleasure, and thank you for sharing a little of your life and a little of your pain with us and from being so vulnerable.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Whenever I share it, I heal a little more. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And until next time, everyone, I'm Mitch West. Take care of yourself and each other.